Brett Yormark just took serious shots at the SEC, and this might not end well. This is the Locked On Big 12, Locked On Baylor crossover.
You are Locked On Big 12, your daily podcast on the Big 12 Conference. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Monday, everybody. Welcome to a Locked On Big 12, Locked On Baylor crossover. I'm Drake Toll from America's #1 Big 12 podcast, Locked On Big 12. That's Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. Thanks for making our shows your first listen every single day. We'll let you know we work hard a lot. All of the time, actually. And during the month of June, this is an opportunity to combat burnout to go to 3 days a week. Monday, Wednesday, Friday is most of when you'll get your dose of Locked On Big 12 and likely Locked On Baylor as well as the Squad Show on Thursday. But more importantly, Brett Yormark takes shots at the SEC. Then BYU and Houston are about to get a lot richer and a lot better. And we'll finish with a Jake Retzlaff update with the situation and the sexual assault accusations. If you hit subscribe, we get to keep our job. Cam, this is great. The Big 12 spring meetings wrap up. Brett Yormark takes the podium and says, we'll play nice, but we're not going to agree with the SEC. We're not going to sit here complacently while we move to the 5+11 format. He's not an irrational guy. He was very clear that he thought going 1 through 12, seeding the teams in the college football playoff based on how good they are rather than their conference championship status was right for college football. He said that. I'm not mad. This is a good thing. Then he says, you know, it's not 5+11. You know, it's not Greg Sankey. You know, it's not the SEC trying to take over and take control and have 4 automatic bids to our 2 automatic bids. Brett Yormark's not buying it.
Yeah, and it's such a rarity because, like, you link those two things together. That's Brett Yormark sticking to his guns, right? He's like, yeah, I'm fine with the 1 through 12, even though the top 4 conference champions is obviously going to favor the Big 12 more often than not. They're probably not going to have a team in the top 4 or 5, but he says it's all about earning it. And we don't want any gimmies. So if I'm saying I'd rather have it be 1 through 12 because we want it to be earned, we don't want just anything just given to us, then I've got to stick to it when it comes to the 5+11 here rather than the 4 and however many 2s it adds up to 16. It's refreshing. And I know this has become like a kind of a moral high ground thing, right? Like with the ACC and Jim Phillips and being like, oh yeah, we need to do what's best for college football and the SEC and the Big Ten won't do that, which is true. But it kind of makes you sound like the annoying moral high ground of it all. But Brett Yormark and his statements here are actually backing this up. He's like, look, there's some good things that we can do for the Big 12. And obviously, you know, based off last year, there are plenty of years where we won't get 2 teams in here without the automatic bids. But we need to do what's good for college football, hombres. And this is what's good for college football. Because I come back to whenever we talk about this, Drake, I come back to the same thing. The playoff, when it was instituted in 2014, after people begging for it for years, was supposed to be about earning it on the field. It's supposed to be about, okay, who can climb into that top 4 or 8 or 12 or whatever it was going to be, and then play it through, earn it. And then it became somewhere along the way of, well, don't earn it until you actually get to the playoff. And then earn it. Okay, we're going to go off all the old BCS metrics beforehand, and we're going to do quality losses for the first time ever and like all this crap, and then you can earn it. But what we're trying to get back to is the ACC and the Big 12 and the other, you know, silent majorities here of college football is just earning it. Like, that's what this is supposed to be. Let it play out on the field. 5+11 does that. Is it going to have more SEC teams than Big 12 teams? Of course it is. Of course it is. And there's still, they might get 8 from those 2 conferences or more every year, but that is the only way we can kind of make it fairsies.
At the same time, Yormark was very pointed when talking about the SEC and the Big Ten being in control of college football. He admitted it. He said they have taken charge. He said they're leading the discussions, is the direct quote. But he also says there's a great responsibility that goes with it. Here's the mic drop moment: to do what's right for college football and not to do anything that just benefits 2 conferences. That's where the lack of faith is an altruistic approach by the Big Ten and the SEC to do what's right for college football. They don't want to, if they can have a 16-team playoff with those two leagues, they're going to do that.
And for those of us who have heard a lot of these quotes over the years or interviewed people like this, Brett Yormark wouldn't be saying that if he didn't think that that was something that's kind of happening right now. He's being diplomatic about it, but he wouldn't say, hey, but they've also got this great responsibility to handle what's best for college football, unless he thinks they're not exactly doing it right now in leading those discussions. So, yeah, I mean, it's an unenviable reality that we're in right now. We know we've faced that for a while, that those two hold the cards and ultimately decide what's best for the rest of college football. I think from a Big 12 standpoint, we're in a great spot with having Brett Yormark not afraid to call them out like that, and have a guy like Brett Yormark up at the forefront. And obviously Phillips in the ACC, he's got his own issues, but with that conference. But here's a guy in Yormark and the Big 12 as a conference that has gotten stronger since those two other conferences really took power over the last 2-3 years, and are not willing to back down off of that. So it's going to be awfully tough for the Big Ten and the SEC to really take over the format the way they want to when guys like Brett Yormark are in charge in other conferences.
Pro's pro. Yormark is the guy that I want representing the Big 12.
Can I do without it? Sure, I can. But everything else, man, he's got a stranglehold. Do I love the 9 p.m. tip-offs when we're playing a non-Arizona team at home in basketball? No, I don't love it. But the other stuff, when Brett Yormark's got the other conferences by the balls, I like that.
I do too. I'm glad I'm not hosting Locked On ACC, because Jim Phillips just doesn't have anybody by the cojones right now. He is just
Brett Yormark's the best thing that's ever happened to him. I'll say that.
Valid. Coming up, BYU and Houston and even UCF and maybe Cincinnati are good at some things, but they're about to get paid. This is Locked On Big 12. Today's show is brought to you by Monarch Money. Why? Because I am 24, man. I don't do the money thing. I look at my bank account and it's just like, hey, you have $0. And when I wonder where all my money went, I don't have to anymore. Monarch Money. It's a personal CFO that gives you full visibility and control of your finances, a complete financial command center. So you stop just managing your money and you start building wealth. I started using it, realized I was paying way too much on food delivery. Now I just budget smarter. I have accountability. Managing money with your partner, also smoother than ever. Set goals, personal accounts, share those, stay on the same page without the stress. Take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That's monarchmoney.com. Code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for half off your first year. Visit Monarch Money and do it today. Cameron Stewart of Locked On Baylor. BYU, Houston, already good at football, basketball, like two pretty solid universities. The Big 12, Brett Yormark just announced, is doling out $558 million for the 2024-2025 athletic season. And BYU, UCF, Cincinnati, Houston, they're only getting $19 million of that. Utah's getting a full share. Colorado's getting a full share. The Pac-12 schools will get a full share that are doing this conference. The teams like BYU and Houston that are already good at revenue sports are doing this without as much money as the rest of the conference. And next year, when they get $32 million like everybody else, $13 more million per year, I don't think we've even seen those schools scratch the surface of what they can be as Power 4 opponents.
It's crazy. I mean, crazy, first off, that Utah had the worst year of any athletic program in the conference and had a full share. Yeah. It's also crazy that payout is $90 million more than the last year of UT and OU. Yeah. And I know there's more teams, obviously, in the Big 12, but we saw all those fans saying, there's no way you're ever going to make, and I know UT and OU are making a ton of money too, but we're doing pretty well here with that payout. But to the ultimate point here about schools like BYU and Houston, I think are the two that are worth highlighting here. Houston's already like running amok in this conference in basketball. Like they're making us look like mincemeat. BYU is kind of a sleeping giant in basketball. And dare I say, the Houston Cougars are something of a sleeping giant in football.
Whoa.
Defense was elite last year. Their offense was like a couple of monkeys trying to hump a football, and so it was awful. But their defense was pretty elite. I think we all agree.
They brought in elite quarterback Connor Wegman to fix that.
Yes, so I've heard. Maybe the best quarterback in the Big 12. Some have said, and I think we all agree they have a pretty dang good coach in Willie Fritz too, who's gonna be there a while. You know, he's in his 60s. I don't think he's like making another big jump anytime soon. And so I think Houston, with that kind of extra revenue coming in with the seeds they've already planted, could make them a legit team in the Big 12. I'm not going to go out there and say they're going to be a powerhouse. They're going to be, you know, Oklahoma in the 2010s or anything like that. But I think that can really change the game. And I think it will do the same for UCF under a more competent head coach at UCF anyway, and that's Scott Frost. And it is amazing what the parity in this conference without us even hitting the full revenue hit yet. I think you could say the same about SMU and the ACC. Of course, they won't see that money till I'm dead, I think. But yeah, it is crazy. Like, you look at the programs, the athletic programs that fell flat this year: Utah, Oklahoma State. I mean, you know, Baylor basketball wasn't what they were in the past. TCU, I don't think really hit expectations in any of their three major sports. And so to think that here's BYU and Houston already making names, especially on the basketball court, and they haven't even hit their money yet. Like, BYU is paying guys millions and millions of dollars to come play basketball for them, and they haven't even hit the money in this conference yet, and what will be a pretty good money-making conference in basketball. It's insane, man. Are those like the sleeping powers that we thought we got rid of with UT and OU?
I mean, it's hard to liken anyone to UT and OU, because not just because of historic success, but because of, assholery. I don't know if we have that degree.
I don't think BYU quite equals that. I don't think so.
No, we don't have Boomer Sooner. We don't have the song on 2nd and 6. There's nothing to
miss it.
Nothing equates to that. We don't have, you know, the horns up at every opportunity, and the second you do horns down, jail, right to jail. Nobody is that strict about their traditions, so I wouldn't liken them to those two schools. And I would hope that we all are still able to rally around kind of Utah as the villain. I don't mind that. I know I've mentioned before, I think Utah is the most important fan base, most important, arguably, athletic department when it comes to building ticket sales, building rivalries, building eyeballs, because people want to hate them. And if that's the case, it's good ultimately for the Big 12. My biggest takeaway from this, and I looped Houston in here, you have to, because they went to the national championship in revenue sport, probably should have won it. But BYU is about to get $13 million more next year. Who signed off on this? Like, if you want to avoid a monopoly on just a school being good in the Big 12, who signed off on giving them $13 million more a year when they're already throwing around money? That is a recipe for creating a powerhouse.
Yeah, I think the basketball program might be like, you know what, Kalani, why don't you keep that?
Yeah.
We've already got that coming in. Why don't you guys keep that? You're really close to something in football. Why don't we both spread the love pretty equally here? It is crazy. And I will say, like, this is for BYU really in their whole history. They've had a lot of challenges to being a really good athletic program. Most of them, I would say they would agree are self-imposed, right? I mean, they were independent for so long, and they have a real religious affiliation, which we can both tell from Baylor that's a hurdle. It's something that you live with because that's what your creed is, right? But it is a hurdle. And BYU has been able to build an incredible athletic program where you can't even drink. You can't even drink coffee on the campus, and they have made a great athletic program out of that and a terrific fan base out of it. And now you're just going to give them more and more money. Like, that is kind of scary for the rest of us, man. I don't mean to keep pumping BYU's tires here, but that is pretty scary for the rest of the conference when it comes to the two biggest sports, right? Football and men's basketball.
Well, doesn't it just seem like the four schools were not set up to fail their first couple of years, but they certainly weren't set up to be a Power 4 caliber athletic department across the board, all four of them. Any success is kind of gravy at that point when you're making 2/3 of what everybody else is getting.
Yeah, and I think you would hear that from the UCF and Cincinnati athletic departments right now. Like, of course they want to be competitive, but when you're entering a conference with the big boys for the first time really ever, I know the Big East used to be obviously huge and a lot bigger in basketball, which is what Cincinnati was in, but you're entering the major college football territory for really the first time ever. It's going to take a little bit. Like that is a long game kind of commitment of it might be 5 or 6 years before we really get into this thing. And I think they're okay to live with that, because now what, year 3, the money is going to start coming in. And when you have a place like, obviously Ohio is a pretty great hotbed for football. Florida, I don't know if you've heard this, Drake, pretty good hotbed for amateur athletics. So they are going to be competing sometime soon if they don't completely mess it up, right? But yeah, it's a long game. It's a long game that you're playing. That this was just getting a seat at the table, but you're not exactly getting the best meal as everybody else is. But the stakes are going to be pretty good here pretty soon.
Coming up, Jake Retzlaff update that is not, I think we're further solidifying. We're there. No Jake Retzlaff this fall. Locked on Big 12, Locked on Baylor. I think it is now very clear that Jake Retzlaff will not play this fall for BYU after what Brian Santiago said, which is very cool, by the way, that Brian Santiago, who is taking the reins from Tom Holmoe, who isn't the athletic director yet, is now getting to be in the driver's seat. He is already getting to field these questions. And the university president, the athletic director fielded questions this week. And Santiago's response to me showcases that we're not anywhere with this. We're not getting anywhere with this. We're not going to be anywhere with this. He's done. Santiago says, it's a fair question when asked about the civil lawsuit. It's a private matter. The university made a statement, and Jake and his attorney have both released statements. Our responsibility is to care for our student athletes. Certainly, it's a tough situation. It'd be ignorant not to say it's a tough situation, but it's a private matter that's going to be handled privately. When someone says it's going to be handled privately, that does not mean in the next 30 minutes, we're going to sit down and hash it out.
Yeah.
That means this is a process. The word process barely begins to encapsulate what we are about to enter with Jake Retzlaff, who's been accused of sexual assault. This is, as it's being handled privately, going to take months on end. And there just isn't a way, whether fair or unfair, ultimately to him, when we find out if he's liable or exonerated, fair or unfair, there just isn't a way he plays this fall, knowing that BYU as an athletic department hasn't taken a strong stand in one direction or the other.
Yeah, it got to the point where Kalani Sitake was basically like, look, we've made a statement. I can't say any more about this. It certainly doesn't point in a good direction for BYU fans and for Jake Retzlaff and his fans. And honestly, this is like, these are the touchiest of subjects. Like, we need to play this whole thing out. When you've got an AD who comes in day one and this is basically thrown on his desk, right? Like, before he's even getting going, they're like, yeah, sorry, man, you got to be a part of this. It's a big deal. This is going to have to be a pretty serious internal investigation. And as we've talked about a few times, maybe making this easier isn't necessarily the right way to frame it for the athletic department. But with BYU's code of conduct, man, like, there's not a lot of wiggle room here. Yeah. He doesn't have to be found guilty or liable because it's a civil case. He doesn't need to be found liable of this act in order for him to break the BYU honor code. So in a way, like, you've got to do almost two investigations here for the price of one, right? You got to make sure that nothing happened, like nothing at all happened, in order for him to be a part of this team. And I've seen a lot of BYU fans in the comment section on both of our videos the last week or so. And I can't argue too hard with this point, but a lot of them have already kind of accepted that he's not going to be there. And they're already arguing about how good they would have been even without him last year, which, he wasn't one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the conference. They were still pretty dang good. But I think the BYU fan base has kind of come to that as well, of he's not going to be our quarterback this fall. And there's nothing that we've seen in the almost 2 weeks since the lawsuit was filed that would suggest that this is a complete farce, that Jake Retzlaff is going to be cleared of this and play in 2025. There's nothing that's even hinted at that just yet.
The closest we've gotten was that release from Provo PD that said, in essence, we've corroborated a couple of cases, which is a wild thing to do, by the way.
Yeah.
And to release a statement about it. Hey, we've corroborated a couple of cases. We don't know, we think this might be the same one. And we tried to reach out to the alleged victim for help. She denied it. That's the closest we've gotten to possible public exoneration. And from BYU's standpoint, the only thing that we could know, the only thing they have 3 options. Option 1, we're not going to make a comment. We're handling it. Option 2, we stand up for our student athletes. We believe Jake Retzlaff, his attorney. We think he's telling the truth, and that he is an upstanding member of our university. He'll play this fall no matter what. Option 3, we believe all victims. We want to take this matter so seriously as to expel Jake Retzlaff from this university. He's done at BYU. They have chosen option 1, which is really, at the end of the day, your only option. Because the second you say Jake Retzlaff is an upstanding student, he can play, and then they find some Snapchats. They go back in the digital log and find some text messages that prove him liable. Or on the back end, you say, we believe the victim. Then we find out Jake Retzlaff's phone pinged in Ogden that night instead of Provo. You're just asking for way more trouble on the back end. And the easiest thing to do is say, our hands are tied. Bear, Tiger, one of the Bachmeyers, here's the football.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's one of those where, and plenty of schools have not gone through this, and it's looked pretty bad. Of this is in the law's hands. Like, the classic, some things are bigger than sports. Like, we can't handle this. This is something that should be happening in every scandal of just, hey, let's let the police handle this. It did at Baylor, and that was still not a good scandal. It didn't happen at Penn State. That was still not a good scandal, right? It doesn't mean that everything's all bright and rosy and everything's a-okay. But to your point, it really is the only way to handle this here. And I know when it happened at Baylor with the whole Art Briles thing, as you remember too, like there all of a sudden became ties to, what does the Baptist church have to do with this? Of course, it's a Baptist university that this happens to. And we hear it already with BYU, even though that has nothing to do with it, right? Nothing to do with it. That already gets attached. That stigma already gets attached. What's happening at the LDS church, that this is happening at BYU, even though they're totally different things. So that's where BYU has to just be like, look, you've already attached what you're going to attach to it. Let's let the process of the law of the United States of America actually play out here before we do anything. Give whomever the effing football right now to throw around at practice, just not Jake Retzlaff. And he could become completely innocent of this, but still, you cannot play on and just say, well, he's playing until we find out anything otherwise. Can't have it. Sorry. I know it stinks, but you can't have it.
I wonder, I won't name an example, but think about a high-profile quarterback, anybody who's won the Heisman in the last 5 years. Okay. Someone who's surefire top 5 NFL draft pick, is going into their senior year of college. Do we get a faster process because it's such a high-profile public case? Do we, again, I don't want to mention a name, but pick any in your brain and say, hey, you found out today this guy may not be able to play this fall. How does a university like Tennessee, Alabama, LSU, right? It's public. They can't skirt the law. But how do you respond? Like, I just don't know if the whole world would stop for a year and a half, 2 years, if the Heisman Trophy winner is accused of this and now has to sit on his hands for a year on end.
Yeah. It's a good point. I doubt it would take criminally long. That was a bad choice of wording. Like really long time. I doubt it would. And mainly because when we think of those quarterbacks and the guys that we're thinking of, whether it be, Trevor Lawrence or Jaden Daniels or Caleb Williams, not that anything happened to those guys, but like they were, for the most part, not USC, major state schools that they were playing at, where we're talking about the highest paid state employees in the state coaching the football team and the massive amounts of power that athletics program and alumni base would have over the judicial process in that state, right or wrong or otherwise. I'm not even saying they pull strings to make sure the kid's innocent, but to make this kind of go a little faster, get it on the right desks, it probably doesn't take as long. That's just a gut feeling. I bet it probably doesn't take as long as I imagine it will for Jake Retzlaff, because now we're hearing like this could take a year. This could take a year and a half. Like, and we saw it, to be fair, again, to use a Baylor example, we saw it with Sean Oakman. That took a long time. That took forever, like 3 years. And he was found not guilty in a court of law. And by that time, his football career is essentially over, so that could be what we're seeing with Jake Retzlaff here. That could take a year and a half. And at that point, he was a good run-of-the-mill Power 4 quarterback who hasn't played in a year and a half. That's a very different kind of scenario. So no, I don't think it takes as long if it's one of those other big-time SEC, Big Ten, or even just a state school with a quarterback of that kind of height.
You said it. I mean, Trevor Lawrence, who's done nothing wrong, stand-up human being. Right. That's why, I hate it. But if you put him in this case, I just don't see it. ESPN would lead every show with it every day until something was figured out.
And that's the thing. It would become too much. It would become too much of a media thing. Like, I mean, we talk about these scandals, the BYU one that we're talking about right now, the Baylor one, big scandal still, like big around college football, but if that same thing was happening at Alabama, that would be the number one sports story in the country every day. So, I think from that standpoint, it would have to be sped up a little bit.
Yeah. This has been Always Will Be. That's Cameron Stewart at Real Kim Stewart on Twitter. Locked On. Thanks for making it your first listen every single day. Crossover with Baylor and Dose Grande.